Yo guys, it's JD here again, back for another video, and this time my analysis today will be more just detective skill rather than me using pure philosophy to clearly define things. But anyways, for today's topic, I'm going to discuss the idea that Granolah likely has UI and Hakai based off the wish logic of the Dragon Balls from Planet Serial and from the narrative panels, or in this case, Toyataro's Foreshadowing, as well as the past of Toyataro's earlier works with the Black Arc and the Moro Arc. This video will release before Chapter 72, and while it may take Chapter 72, 73, and maybe 74 to fully explain and show all of Granolah's powers and abilities, I'm making this video now since we know, based off spoilers, that Chapter 72 is when the fight will start. I'm just getting this idea out there in case I'm right, or in the case that I'm wrong, but we'll see. Firstly, let's talk about the logic of Dragon Ball wishes and how it's been established in the canon. So the problem of the wishes of whether it's to be immortal or whether, in this case, for Granolah, to be the strongest or greatest warrior, the problem is that the dragons have different levels of power based on the following known facts and evidence. The strength of the Dragon Clan Guardian, that is, referencing Kami, or recently, with Dende, and the current Guardian on planet Namek, or Monaito from the serial Dragon Balls. And then in this arc, referring to the Granolah arc, we learned about other conditions to how the Dragon Ball wish powers operate. That is, the size of the Dragon Balls, how big they are, or how small they are, and how many of them there is to collect, whether they be 2, like the Cerulean Dragon Balls, or 7, like most of the other sets. But what all the dragons do have in common, though, is having a shared nexus of knowledge concerning events in the Dragon Ball universe. This is, again, based on them being imbued with power and other things through a ritual that is probably based off the Namekian Book of Legends that we've briefly heard about in the Dragon Ball canon. While this hasn't been clearly outlined by Toriyama or other official sources, it is important to know that. So in the case of, say, immortality, the reason why a wish of immortality likely can't be granted by the small dragons, whether it's Shenron, Purunga, or Taranba, which is the Cerulean dragon, is that if it were the case, then Zamasu from the Goku Black Arc wouldn't have used the Super Dragon Balls to become immortal. He met with Zeno, who is an all-knowing being, and since Zeno knows all about the other sets of Dragon Balls, he would have asked or told Zamasu that, hey, you can actually make the wish to be immortal with the other sets of the Dragon Balls, getting away from the eye of the other gods and possibly ruining your cover. So, Zamasu probably would have asked these kinds of questions, which he was asking many questions with talking with Zeno. So we know, based off just that in context sort of inference, that the normal Dragon Balls that aren't the Super Dragon Balls, they likely can't be used to become immortal. And why is this relevant? Well, because in regards to Taranba, which is a Cerulean dragon, the reason that such a wish was seemingly made for the case of Granolah, that is, the wish to be the greatest warrior in the Universe 7, was because enough time has passed in the development of Universe 7, the mortal realm, so that there have been spawns of new warriors, Son Goku, Vegeta, Broly, and probably many others. This is essentially a constantly moving goalpost argument, and so at any point in Super or Z, if Granolah, were to have made this wish, whatever arc we're talking about, he would have been as strong as whatever the current, the current strongest character was. So, barring the gods, of course, so barring Whis and Beerus. So the wish likely could have made at, whatever peak and power Goku or Vegeta or Broly were, and Granolah would have received that same spike in power and more to be the greatest or strongest warrior in the universe. In this case, greatest, because that's the in-context translations that were used in Chapter 69 and Chapter 70. But however, what has changed dramatically is that Goku and Vegeta now possess God Ki and their God forms. Or right now, currently, it looks like they have God Ki in base, possibly. That's another video. So the dragon, Taranba, was still sure that he could have made the wish for Granolah, knowing these things, knowing that Goku has UI and has seemingly mastered it, and knowing that Vegeta at that same time was learning Hakai. And we also know that Goku has knowledge of Hakai too, even if he's not proficient in it. So the dragon was still sure he can make the wish for Granolah if he agreed to the special condition of exchanging the life force that's afforded by his cerulean biology and senescence, which is the rate of aging. So, and another issue with Dragon Ball wishes is how you ask for a certain wish in the case of mortality, which I may make a separate video talking about how or what kinds of immortality there are. So, going back to Granolah, I think Granolah is the strongest in the universe because of the techniques. Although it might be, again, because of how you interpret greatest or strongest differently. But for the in-context evidence that we have, the chapter title for chapter 70 was called The Universe's Greatest Warrior. In chapter 69, he specifically asked Jirambo, I wanted to be the strongest. Turn me into the greatest warrior. Now, for me, greatest can mean better at something than someone else, while strongest is more, I have more power and X than someone else. It's just essentially I am stronger in just regards to pure power, which is in the Dragon Ball universe, ki, right? Ki in your ki control. So think of Jiren. Jiren doesn't have any special techniques, but he's the strongest for, say, Universe 11, right? He's just a brute. So as for my argument, which is that Granolah has, or possibly has, UI and Hakai, I used the finger thing that he did against Oil, and then the dodge that he was doing against Maki, the heaters, as the panel evidence. But my argument is way more than that. It is that I use the explosion and the dust effects when he nullified Oil's attack, and when he first did a display of his power following the wish with the boulder, right? But essentially, when I use those pieces of panel evidence, what I'm suggesting is the narrative method that Toyo is implying as the drive for why this is the case. And this is what I'm referencing is no different than the Zeno Button, right? This is no different than the Zeno Button being, in a couple manga panels in the Goku Black arc, and then it seemingly was the plot reason for why Zamasu was defeated. And in the Moro arc, the analogous thing would have been the Moro and the Merus hand theory, right? Merus got his neck, touched by Moro 7-3 using 7-3's abilities, and although the arm was severed, it was never off-screen or destroyed. And if you look at the chapters following that fight, which I believe it was 61, I think, you could tell that Toyatoro was hinting at something, that Moro was going to get another power-up following his transformation fusion with 7-3. He lost his left hand, which was the same hand that was lost when he touched Merus, right? And, Toyatoro would zoom in on the panels of whatever hand or whenever he was doing hand gestures. So again, this is the Toyataro's narrative foreshadowing that he's done before in previous arcs. And so, getting to the in-context explanations that we currently have as evidence, if you thought that Granolah might have had Hakai in Chapter 70 after the wish when he uses his telepathy to, or telekinesis to, levitate a boulder, and then he blew it up, right? That shot of him levitating and blowing up the boulder was right after, right, in terms of the sequencing of the panels, it was right after Beerus explained what Hakai was. And Beerus had already done an explosion of a similar magnitude, right? And then Oatmeal literally comments that, what was that technique, right? If it was just a normal Kai explosion, Oatmeal wouldn't have made the suggestion that it was something different, right? There's this insinuation that it's a different thing. And again, it's right after the explanation of Hakai. So the problem is if you thought that may have been Hakai, and let's say you agree, for the sake of this argument, that he does have Hakai, then you probably should also agree that he has UI as well, because the Dragon Tarambo had to know who the strongest was before making Granolah the strongest, right? If Goku was the strongest mortal in Universe 7, which he was, based off the feats we've done, with the feats that we've seen with the Moro arc, and with Whis' own comments about who the current strongest in Universe 7 was when Goku was asking, right? Broly wasn't mentioned, and that was the villain before Moro. So And we know Goku now has the completed UI and is still getting further increases in power, right? But why is Goku the strongest? Why is he the strongest? Well, he's the strongest because of techniques, right? Dragon Ball paradigm has shifted away from brute force, right? Just having a bigger power level or combat battle power, right? It shifted from that paradigm to the paradigm that it's techniques which grant power, which grant a key multiplier, right? Goku's Kaioken, what is that? It's a technique. However, it's a key multiplier. It increases his current base strength, his current combat power, right? Genki Dama, what is that? It's a technique that gathers Genki, which is a aspect of ki, which is also, it's a key multiplier. You're concentrating energy into a ball of light, right? And then Super Saiyan, those are transformations. However, they are still technically techniques. And what do? We know Super Saiyan is a 50 times key multiplier. Super Saiyan 2 is a 100 times key multiplier, etc., etc. So all of Goku's arsenal of technique, all of Goku's power comes from his techniques, which is symbolic of what Goku's character is. He's a guy who had to train, he had to learn from others and obtain knowledge in the form of techniques to be, who he is currently, the strongest in Universe 7, right? So the dragon is aware of this. The dragon is aware that Goku is probably the strongest in Universe 7, so why is he the strongest right now? Well, he's the strongest right now because of UI, right? Because of what UI is. We don't know quantitatively how strong it is in terms of the key multiplier, but we know it is a significant increase in power from Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken. So the dragon, to therefore make this possible, to give Goku UI, or to give Granolah UI and Hakai, because technically Goku does have knowledge of the Hakai. He's attempted to use it before. The dragon used Granolah's life force and latent potential to give him the necessary power and body to wield those things. Whether his body's durable enough to wield those things, we don't know yet. But the dragon used his life force as the last condition, essentially, to make this happen. And so I think it fits Toyotaro's narrative style, right? And if you really think about it, right, this arc is about UI. It's about perfecting UI. And then in Vegeta's case, it's about learning, Hakai and also mastering Hakai, right? This arc is about those godly techniques being mastered by the two main protagonists in the story. And so Granolah, he was weak in comparison. He makes a wish to become the strongest in the universe. And who do we know is the strongest or the greatest in the universe? Well, it's Goku. And again, it's because of techniques. Techniques like UI and Hakai. Techniques like Kaioken. Techniques like having, or learning to have God Ki, right? And then for the people that might say, but JD, UI and Hakai, they require opposite mental states. So how could Granolah have both? Well, you're right. They are opposite mental states. And I don't think Granolah can use both at the same time. What I mean is that I disagree with the idea that Granolah is using both Ultra Instinct and Hakai at the same time in combat. I think he has to switch between the two, because they're, essentially Buddhist Taoist states of mind, right, that are opposite in nature. Ultra Instinct, again, if you ever watch Geekdom's videos, it's based off the idea of Mushindo Shen, right, a Buddhist sense of emptiness, right? It's a form of enlightenment. And then, there's a physical change that happens in the character, right? Their eyes and hair and the glow of their aura, changes significantly, which we haven't seen yet with Granolah, but save that point because I have an explanation for that. While the Hakai, though, is a Buddhist Taoist state of mind based off nothing but destruction. So, those two states of mind are literally antithetical to each other. Going back to some of the panel evidence, right? We know after the wish was made, Granolah learned things. He learned things, right? He didn't just get stronger like most people are suggesting. He got stronger because he now knows things, right? We know prior to the wish, Granolah was pretty weak, right? The Heaters thought he was a joke, and they just use him for small jobs here and there. He's this mercenary bounty hunter, type of character. Granolah could not fly. Granolah, used a blaster for a lot, and then for serious opponents, he would take off his headpiece, or that he would, use his cerulean eye abilities to project his ki, right? But he did not seem to have the ability to fly, which is, Boku no Jutsu, and he didn't seem to have ki sensing, because when he tried to sense for Frieza's whereabouts following the wish, Monaito said that that's his ability that he didn't think he had, implying that he never had it in the first place, right? So there's already an argument that Granolah has received techniques as a result of this wish, which is, again, further evidence that, well, if he got those techniques, Boku no Jutsu and ki sensing, what's not to say that he got some of the higher tier abilities that Goku and Vegeta got, since those are the goalposts currently for when this wish was made. And then in regards to the heater fight, right? When Granolah is fighting Oil, he does that finger pose, which I suggested on Twitter and social media. I didn't just say it was because of the pose that insinuated that he had Ultra Instinct. It's more so that when Chapter 72 came out, right, and we find out Goku was using Ultra Instinct incorrectly, and that UI can actually be used in base, right? Well, what did Goku do? He learned to use UI in base, and then in the process of him dodging Whis' staff, which is a part of the training, Goku stops the staff with his finger, right, while in base, right, which is something that all the other angels have actually done before. Whis has blocked things with his finger. Grand Priest has blocked things with his finger. Vados, I believe, blocked things with his finger. So there's already this clear indication that's like a pretty impressive feat. Now, obviously, Jiren and some other villains may have done the same thing, but it's very special in this case in terms of the context. And so when I made the insinuation that it was the blocking of the pushing away of Oil, by Granolah with the finger, it wasn't so much that it was the pose. It was just that following a second reading, you realize, hey, that's actually very similar to what Goku did. And then come to find out, well, if Granolah does have UI, what's not to say he has UI of the current iteration that Goku has, which is the base form UI. And if he has the base form UI, then that implies he might be able to transform like Goku does and get the silver-haired UI form, again, as a trap card like Goku would have. So it does seem, based off the chapter and the previous panels of the Hakai or the UI being done in the manga, that Granolah probably has those two. And again, I highly suggest that this makes sense because, the point of this arc is to achieve those techniques in their fullest form, right? But like with the Moro arc, when Goku achieved it, he needed someone that was worthy enough to use that against. But Moro, even with the 7-3 fusion, was not enough. So what did Toyataro do? Well, he saved the power that was copied from Merus and used that as a way of giving Moro the Ultra Instinct. And people that say, well, Granolah doesn't have the mindset to use Ultra Instinct, well, again, Moro literally is a genocidal maniac, right? And he was still using UI, right? His body physically changed, his fur turned from black to silver, which is a signal that he achieved Ultra Instinct. And he even talks about how his body was moving on its own. Further evidence that you can still use UI. And this kind of makes sense because the wish logic of acquiring power is no different than using, say, 7-3's copying ability, right? Because you're essentially, what's shared between those two things is acquiring power unnaturally, which is what a dragon giving you power would do, or using some kind of device to copy said power. So it's the same kind of concept. You're acquiring something that you didn't train for, and so you're bypassing the prerequisites or physical requirements that may need to be done to achieve those things. And the way I see this fight playing out with Granolah versus Goku and Vegeta is that since Granolah has both, if he fights Vegeta first, well, Vegeta will use Hakai, and then Granolah will use UI as the counter to that, right? And then if Goku fights Granolah first, Goku's going to use UI, and then Granola's going to counter with overwhelming power in the form of Hakai, right? Because people have always wanted to know which one is better, since with this arc and Beerus and whatnot, we've been having this suggestion or this insinuation that Hakai is very, it can be on par with the UI. It's a technique of the destroyers, right? And Beerus thinks that it can be better than the technique of the angels. So, in summary, my argument is as follows for Granolah having these techniques. The dragon had to know who the strongest or greatest was, which was Goku. 2, Goku is the strongest or greatest because of techniques, right? UI, Kaioken, Spirit Bomb, Super Saiyan, these are all techniques which are key multipliers which increase your base strength. My third reason is that Toyotaro's narrative style, or foreshadowing, which he's done in the Goku Black arc, and which he's done in the Moro arc. And those ended up happening exactly, as I stated, right? The Zeno Button was used to stop Zamasu and Moro to have any chance against Goku's UI, he had to get UI as well, which he did through the use of Merus. And then my fourth argument is God Key. Essentially, when when Granolah achieved his power as a result of the wish and went to go fight the Heaters, no one could detect his strength. The Heaters were not able to detect how strong Granolah was. They didn't even take him seriously, which, you might say, oh, Granolah's suppressing his power, but we do know that if you have God Key, you can't sense it. You can feel the pressure, but you can't sense it. And so it's very possible Granolah has God Key as a result of the wish, since we know that UI and Hakai technically do require, or there's enough evidence to suggest that they both require God Key, because Goku, right, if he when he tried to use the Hakai, he was in Super Saiyan Blue, right, which by definition uses Hakai, right? And the case with UI, when Goku goes UI, characters like Piccolo and Gohan have made the statements that they can't feel Goku's energy, right? Whether it's in Omen or in the Silver Hair form, Goku's aura is calm and tranquil and has the properties that we've known to associate God Key with. And then the fifth and final point is that the theme of the arc is UI and Hakai, and like with the Moro arc, to test the power of Goku's completed UI, again, Toyatoro gave Moro UI because of the power creep. We've reached a point in the story where if Goku and Vegeta have these god techniques completely mastered, then the only way for characters and villains to be relevant is to have similar god techniques. And so that's where Granolah comes in. My hope is to be wrong, and I hope Granolah has something unique or special, but unfortunately, I really think this is the direction of the story. But anyways, guys, thank you again for watching, and I have more videos planned. Bye, guys.